Thank you to everyone for coming this evening. I'd like to welcome you to our Trinity Athletics Class of 2024 Hall of Fame induction ceremony and dinner. My name is Drew Galbraith. I'm the Director of Athletics here at Trinity and your host this evening. As we get started, I'd first like to welcome our Hall of Fame inductees, their families, our alumni, current and former coaches, and all of our guests. Also want to welcome all of our previously inducted Hall of Fame members who are in attendance tonight. George Brickley, Ron Duckett, John Dunham, Rick Hazelton, Roger LeClaire's family, Robin Shepard, and Charlie Sticka. We're so glad to have all of you here with us this evening. I'd also like to thank our current Hall of Fame committee members who are in the audience with us tonight, Rick Hazelton and Robin Shepard, John Hallis, Matt Greason, and Kristen Noon. Thank you all for your service. We're so excited to continue this tradition. It gives us a great opportunity to honor Trinity's athletic history with student athletes that stretches all the way back to 1856. We're so proud to have celebrated 48 of our incredible alumni through our first 5 ceremonies and thrilled to add 8 more well-deserving recipients to that list this evening. Today was a quintessential Trinity Fall Day. We celebrated wins from 4 Trinity teams, saw amazing fellowship, community building, and friendships all over our beautiful campus. It shows us the very best of our institution and who we are as Bantams. We could not do what we do in athletics without the amazing support we receive from the institution as well as our alumni. That stems from strong leadership, especially that of our president, Joanne Berger-Sweeney, and our board of trustees. To kick off our evening, it's my privilege to introduce the president of Trinity College, Joanne Berger-Sweeney.
Hello and welcome to the Hall of Fame at Trinity College. It is such a pleasure to see you all here. There are a couple of things that I want to convey to you this evening. First of all, just how proud I am of the athletics enterprise at Trinity College. Please pardon me for just a moment for being a proud parent. I'm sorry, a proud president. I'm getting thrown off by this mic being so close. A proud president, and to share with you that our student athlete scholars here at Trinity College have GPAs that are higher than the average at Trinity. Let me repeat that. Our student athletes have higher GPAs than the average GPAs, just by a little. But anything that people want to say about scholar athletes and how they integrate into the community, they would be absolutely wrong in saying that our scholar athletes are not the best and represent the best of Trinity College. So I am very, very proud of that as the president. The second piece of data that I want to share with you is that we do student satisfaction data across all of our students and student populations. And I don't think you will be surprised to find that the satisfaction among our student athletes is higher than the average student. And I think it is because they are part of an incredible community here at Trinity College. So if you walk away thinking about 2 things, you could think about how well they perform academically, and then how well integrated and how basically happy our student athletes are. If you remember those two things, we will all go away happy. Now, there's one other thing that I want to share with you. I think many of you who are here know that this will be my last induction ceremony as president of Trinity College. I am retiring at the end of this academic year. So I am going to ask you to do something for me, and that is to please think about what sport I should take up in retirement. Some have suggested maybe center of a basketball team. I'm not sure that's utterly realistic. But I am going to be taking votes by the end of the evening as to which sport you think I should take up. But it is because I am a huge fan, not just of Trinity, but actually of all athletics, but particularly of here at Trinity College. And all that I have done to support athletics is because I support the Trinity spirit, and I think our scholar athletes represent that as best as anyone on Trinity's campus. So thank you for coming. Thank you for all of you who are here. I dub you all honorary or real bantams. You are part of the bantam spirit, and we are so happy to be honoring this next set of inductees. Thank you, and don't forget your vote for which sport I will take up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, President Bergen-Sweeney, for your comments. Now we move into our inductions. So we will do 3 inductions and then serve dinner. After dinner, we will have 3 more inductions, and then after dessert, we'll have our final 2 inductions of the evening. Our first inductee this evening is an individual who's the all-time leading scorer for women's basketball and helped the softball team to 2 NIAC titles in 1987 and 1989. Please join me in celebrating Leanne LeBrun Deneen.
She catapulted, I think, in particular, the softball program. Leanne was an impressive pitcher, and clearly our standings every year kind of reflected just how good she was, because she really was the leader on the mound. You can just tell she was always thinking. She was a really smart pitcher, too. I have to say, she kind of freaked me out when I first got there because, boy, she was throwing pretty hard. And she was very committed to softball and the program and really wanted it to excel. It was only, I think, about 5 years in. Leanne was a turnkey person in really propelling softball at Trinity. She was incredibly hardworking, no matter how much pain she was in, and she was sometimes in pain with, I believe, her neck and her back at times. She would go out there. It wasn't even a question. She wanted the ball. Really, because of her, I think, and her pitching, we were able to really pull a cohesive team together, and Leanne led us to several championships. And that 1,000th point that she shot, she had perfect form, came right off the tip of her fingers, and it was just like any other shot. You know, she was there, and in fact, and when she got it, she wanted everyone to quickly move on, even though they did stop the game and honor her 1,000th point. I mean, just like Leanne, she's just like, let's go, we've got a game to play here. You know, like, did not like the spotlight, was really, you know, grateful for her teammates, obviously, for helping her get there, but most important is, you know, 1,000 points, that's not easy to do, especially with the abbreviated seasons that we had. We didn't play nearly as many games back then as the women do now in softball and basketball. So her achievement really stands out to me. She was pretty committed to her craft and worked really hard at it.
So yesterday when I found out that I was speaking first, I was pretty nervous because I don't really speak in front of people that are grown-ups. I'm an elementary school teacher. But anyways, I was never a leadoff hitter, and so when I told my husband yesterday that I was first, he said, "You don't have to hit a home run, you just have to get on base." And then my son said, "Actually, you can just get a walk." So trying to make me feel a little better. So it's an incredible honor to be standing here tonight and to be recognized among such an amazing group of athletes and coaches who've made significant contributions to Trinity Athletics. Congratulations to all of you. I'd like to start by thanking those that had a part in my being here right now, to Drew and to Brenna and to the Hall of Fame committee for supporting my nomination to be inducted tonight. Thank you to my parents, who are my biggest fans, who I wish could be here tonight, but I know they're watching proudly from above. And my siblings, all of them came and surprised me here tonight. So my two older sisters were also athletes and were huge in cheering me on. And then I have three brothers, and in birth order, I was between my brothers. So I was always included in their games and had my share of bruises and stitches and black eyes. But I probably wouldn't have become the competitor that I became without you guys, so thank you. Thank you to my husband, Jerry, and my two sons, Brett and Charlie, and to my daughter, Megan, her husband, Sean. Thank you for all making the effort to be here to celebrate this night and weekend together. I love you guys. Thank you to Rick Hazelton. He's here, I think, somewhere. Hi, Rick. The athletic director at the time I was at Trinity, and to my coaches who believed in my potential and pushed me to be the athlete that I became. Unfortunately, none of them are still coaching at Trinity. Is Don Miller here tonight? So for those of you that don't know Don Miller, he's a legendary, incredibly successful Trinity football coach, and he was also our first softball coach. I'm not sure he volunteered for that position, but he was our coach. He was used to coaching tough football players, and I think it was a little awkward for him to be coaching women, and he used to actually, I think he was surprised by our grit and determination and competitiveness. And I can still picture him in his sweatsuit with the towel rolled up, tucked into the top of his sweatsuit. I remember that we often laughed about it, that in practices he never wanted us to run at full speed for some reason. He'd give us these random fractions of how fast he wanted us to run, like 5/10 ladies, 6/15. And then he'd, okay, ladies, we're gonna bring it up to 7/8 speed. We loved him, but he was totally baffled by us, I think. And lastly, thank you to the most important part of my Trinity experience, my teammates and lifelong friends. Thank you, Robin Silver-Grace, for nominating me to be standing here tonight, and to Karen Farquhar-Packard for being here to celebrate and support me, and to Kathy Ennis, who couldn't be here tonight, and Lisa Banks, who was my catcher. I consider myself so fortunate to have competed in the time that I did. It was long before strength and conditioning coaches were working with athletes the way they do, before dynamic stretching was even a thing, before teams traveled by coach bus in serious Trinity swag. and before taking a semester abroad would be nearly impossible for an athlete. And by the way, who knew that chocolate milk was a recovery drink? We were way ahead of our time, especially if chocolate ice cream qualifies. But most importantly, I'm grateful that I played in a simpler time, a time before sports specialization took hold, a time before when nights and weekends and summers weren't dominated by AAU and club teams, a time when we were able to have summer and weekend jobs, which I'd argue taught us some of life's most valuable lessons, and a time when we got to play basketball during basketball season and softball during softball season. That being said, I like to think that my teammates and I helped to pave the way for the female athletes that came after us. My first year at Trinity was only the third year of the softball program, and we had its first winning season, but we lost in the first round of the NIAC tournament. And the following year, thanks to an influx of incredible athletes, namely Robin, Lisa, Karen, and Kathy, we were 11-1 and won a NIAC championship, which was the highest level of competition available to us at the time. During that time, and for years after, Trinity softball became a regular championship contender. My senior year, after winning the championship at Wheaton College in a harrowing come-from-behind in the bottom of the 7th game, thanks to my giving up so many walks, we were ready to celebrate. That was back in the day, mind you, when the coaches, God bless them, drove the van with our oversized boombox, deafeningly blasting our mixed tapes behind them. After the champagne on the field post-game, our parents, unbeknownst to the coaches, Rick Hazelton, you should cover your ears, helped load coolers of beer into the back of the van. And on our 2-hour drive back to Hartford, we had to stop on the side of the road at least 5 times. With all 13 players messily spilling out of the van and bolting toward the woods each time we stopped. On the other hand, our basketball team had its share of growing pains. I think we won 4 games my freshman year, but through resilience, determination, and hard work, we made it to the NIAC tournament 3 years later. I'm proud of my points and rebounding records, but honestly, it wasn't always pretty. I spent the fall semester of my senior year in Vienna, and I came back to Trinity incredibly out of shape, partially due to a daily visit to the gelato shop that was, fortunately or unfortunately, right across the street from our school. The first game back, I had to score 14 points to hit 1,000. My parents and family had come and brought my junior and senior high school coaches to see the momentous occasion. I remember scoring 2 points in the first half. And I went into the locker room like, oh my God, I'm not gonna make it. I had the biggest pit in my stomach. And these people came all the way to see me play badly. But luckily things picked up a bit in the second half and someone conveniently fouled me when I needed just 1 more point. On the court or field, we were fierce competitors. We wanted to win for each other. We learned and we grew together, and we knew that success only came out of working collectively. But we also knew how to have fun. Our days and nights were filled with times I'll never forget. On more than a few occasions, we raced out of classes in order to hit Dairy Queen before practice, joking that if we were ever in an accident, the softball team would take a serious hit, losing its pitcher, catcher, first baseman, shortstop, and center fielder in one fell swoop. We were also very attentive of our tan lines, which I don't know if you noticed in those pictures. Thank you, Robin. I remember on our one and only spring training trip, we were lying on the beach, probably after a late night out, and most definitely slathered in baby oil. And the Harvard softball team was right beside us, and they were running wind sprints and practicing sliding into bases. And they beat us the next day. But we were tan. I love that we were able to have that balance of fun and competition, and that we were able to play more than one sport, which isn't quite as easy to do now. Today, those memories that we made both on and off the court and field inevitably lead to stories that make us laugh until our stomachs hurt. And we never fail to tell these stories over and over again when we're together. In closing, my time at Trinity was one of my most favorite chapters of my life. I am beyond grateful to have had the opportunity to represent Trinity on the basketball court and softball field, and to have had the luck and privilege to have called and continue to call these women my friends. Thank you to everyone who's been a part of this journey with me and for celebrating this night together. I appreciate it more than you know. Go Trin. Sorry, it was long.
Great job. Up next, we celebrate the legacy of one of Trinity's longest tenured football coaches. Please join me in celebrating Dan Jesse. Trinity coaching legend Dan Jesse graduated from Pacific University in 1926, where he starred in football, basketball, and baseball. After graduating from Pacific, Jesse went on to play professional baseball in the Pacific Coast League and the Southern League before a knee injury prevented him from continuing his baseball career with Cleveland in the major leagues. As Jesse changed course, he obtained his master's degree from Columbia and then became a faculty member and coach at Trinity College. In 36 years as the head football coach, Jesse's squads racked up 4 unbeaten seasons. The Bantams secured his 150th win in his final game at the helm with a come-from-behind win over rival Wesleyan. On the diamond, Jesse led the Bantams to over 230 victories over 32 seasons. He received many national accolades, including being the first Division III coach to be elected as president of the National College Football Coaches Association. He was also inducted to the Helms Hall of Fame and the Baseball Coaches of America Hall of Fame, as well as awarded with the Connecticut Man of the Year Award from the University Club of Hartford. Dan Jesse's impact on our athletic programs is still felt today, with our football, men's lacrosse, and track teams competing on the field that bears his name. His commitment to success and competition has shaped Trinity athletes long after his retirement and passing. We're honored to induct Dan Jesse into the Trinity Athletics Hall of Fame. I'd like to invite Ed Spino and Kevin Callahan to the stage to speak about legendary coach Dan Jesse.
I'm Ed Spino, and you might want to say, who the hell is he? I came here in 1955 as a result of as a result of coming to Trinity as a swimmer. And at Trinity they had the prep school championships, and I happened to do well there, and the swim coach was also the football trainer. So after one of the meets, I think in my senior year, Bob Slaughter, who we called Rabbit, introduced me to Dan Jesse, and we made a deal that if I came here, because I've been competing in swimming since I was 7, I didn't want to do it anymore. So Dan, I wanted to play football, and Dan agreed to allow me to play, to swim in the Eastern Collegiate Championships on the relay, and I did that. So anyway, that was my introduction to Trinity, and I called my father and I said, Dad, my father was a 1923 graduate of Penn Wharton School. And here I am in 1954 at Canterbury School down the way here. And I said, Dad, I've chosen the college I'm going to go to. And he said, really, where? And I said, I'm going to Trinity College. And he said, where's that? And I said, it's in Hartford, Connecticut. He said, oh, I see. Sounds like a fifth class school. So I called Rabbit, and I said, Rabbit, I'm in trouble. My father doesn't know Trinity. Could you give me a couple of names? So he gave me 2 names, and I called my father back. And I said, Dad, we were in the railroad construction business. And I said, Dad, one of the fellows that went to Trinity is Robert Clemens, who's president of the Pennsylvania Railroad. He said, okay. And I said, the other one is, I'd like to introduce you to, is Keith Funston, who was president of Trinity and now president of the New York Stock Exchange. He said, it sounds like a great school. So anyway, what I want to be able to give over to you is the fact that Dan was an advocate. When you showed up for football at Dan, we had to play freshman football before we went to the varsity. And when you went to the varsity that first day, Dan would say, I'm going to teach you football as a little game of life. you're going to learn how to discipline yourself to the point where you can reach your capabilities. And we, me and my staff, we're going to identify those capabilities, and in a very positive way, we will share them with you as you go along. And just to step aside from that, that was Dan. He never talked about anybody in a negative way as it related to their capabilities, but he played them relative to their capabilities and honored that. And I'd like to just share with you, I've called a few of the people that played with me and with, under Dan. I'd like to share a couple of things with you. And I'm here tonight, as I was in 2019. I'm here tonight with Franny LeClaire, whose husband, Roger LeClaire, was a teammate of mine and a dear friend of mine. Roger LeClaire played in 1954 on the freshman team with me, and then he left school. I flunked out. He left school because he missed Franny. So both of us, while we were out, Dan became a part of our lives. I brought my cleats and my football back and said to Dan, I'm really ashamed of myself. I flunked out. I'm not going to be able to continue at Trinity. And as a matter of fact, I've joined the Marines. Dan said, no, you're going to come back. And he got on the phone and called the Marines. He knew somebody there, and they deferred me. So that was great. Roger, on the other hand, Roger, when he went home to be with Franny, left school, and Dan, and he went to work for a carpet mill. And Dan went up there and talked with Roger and urged him through Franny and his parents to come back to school. And Raj, then we were ineligible to play in 56, but we played in 57, 58, and 59. And Roger, whose father was Canadian, had never taken out a U.S. citizenship, the Canadian League came to Roger and said, look, if you take a Canadian citizenship, you come up here and we'll pay you, $8,500 to play in Canada. Because in Canada in those days, they could carry 10 Americans, but that was it. So he would be the 11th one, but he'd be a Canadian. And so Roger said no, and Dan was able to deal with the NFL. Denver wanted Roger, and in a very surreptitious way, he was basically their first draft choice. But Dan introduced him to George Halas, and he went over and played with the Chicago Bears. And at the Chicago Bears, he was not only a linebacker, but a kicker, and today is the 11th highest scorer at the Chicago Bears. So that was the advocacy that I wanted to put forth with Dan. Not only did Dan go with Roger and get him back to Trinity, he went to Fran and Roger's wedding and was very close with them, and was very, very proud of him. The other advocacy I want to talk about is with Charlie Sticka. Charlie's here tonight. Charlie is probably somebody that everybody knows. He's renowned, for his feats in football here at Trinity. I knew Charlie early on. He had gone to Natick High and then did a postgraduate year at Trinity Pauling School, and he wanted to go to Harvard. And but there was a fellow by the name of Phil Hoy there who Harvard took, and they could only take one person. Dan went over and met with Jack Carpo, the coach over there, and also the headmaster, and had Charlie come over here, and he had a wonderful career, and also played as a Trinity player. He played in the National East-West game. The fellow playing with him had gone to Penn State and played with the Baltimore Colts, who was a friend of mine, Lenny Moore. And Lenny told me, he said, look, that guy, Charlie Sticka, was probably one of the best backs I've ever seen in my life. So the other person I want to talk about where there was an advocacy, the advocacy with Charlie was that Frank Leahy from Notre Dame came after Charlie in his sophomore year and promised him the moon, right? And Dan got on the phone and went right at Leahy, and Leahy backed off. So we were very, very fortunate because not only did he back off, Charlie told Dan, I would never have gone to Notre Dame. I want to play for Trinity College. The other thing I wanted to share with you was I talked with Margie DeColony today, her husband, Bill DeColony, who is unfortunately in an Alzheimer's unit, played here, and Dan also got him with the Chicago Bears. And I asked Margie, I said, if Bill were to share with me just a little something, what would he say? Oh, she said he's always talking about Dan, and Dan would say to him, Bill, or Deco, most people in this world are either nice or either nice or I can't read it in the sun there. They either live or they learn, and I want to tell you, and you're the kind of person who just lives. So he took that with him all his life. Paul Cataldo, and this is key. Paul Cataldo, who played on that team and went on to Boston College and Boston College Law School. I talked with him, and Paul, like a number of our contemporaries at our age, 88 to 90, is having some problems. But he said, in his senior year, the Hartford Journal said that Trinity wasn't going to win any games, and Dan told him that. Dan shared that with the team, that where they were here in town, and so they went up and they played Amherst. They beat Amherst. Then they went and played Wesleyan, and they beat Wesleyan. And on the way back, Paul said to Dan, how do you feel about this? And he said, here, sit next to me. And he moved everything and he sat next to him on the bus. And he went through the most positive conversation that Paul has ever had. He didn't talk badly about the Hartford newspaper. He didn't talk badly about anybody who hadn't done their job. He said, one of the things you have to understand, Paul, in my position is I sit on top and I work with the players to the top of their capabilities. And if they miss something, that's because of the fact that they're not capable to go to that next step. And he wanted me to share that with you. Now, the one thing I did want to share with you also is Mo Jabowski. Mo is in the Hall of Fame as a deferred. He's been inducted, but he's been deferred to have a ceremony like this. And he was a pitcher here. And then he signed with the Chicago Cubs. The amazing thing was he was from outside of Hartford, and the New York Yankees came to Mo and his family, which they weren't allowed to do really, and offered his father, a Polish immigrant, a brand new car, and the mother, they offered to redo the house any way she wanted to, and then they offered Mo $10,000. Mo came back because now his family were going to prosper, in a sense, from something that he had done, especially his dad, who was a hardworking blue-collar guy. And Dan looked at me and said, don't accept. Dan then went to the Chicago Cubs and talked with them and a few others, and Mo signed for $80,000 with the Chicago Cubs because of Dan's advocacy. So that's what I wanted to share with you about this wonderful guy. You saw all the numbers. You saw all the numbers, and he was a Division III football coach who was president of the National College Football Association, and also was on the rules committee for collegiate baseball, and made a big difference in all of our lives. There's many of us who would say, you know, if it wasn't for Dan, and it wasn't for Joe Clark, the dean, and it wasn't for, you know, other people, but especially Dan, we really wouldn't know how to maneuver through life. Thanks.
Thanks, Ed. My name's Kevin Callahan, and I've had the great opportunity of working with Drew and his team to help compile a history of Trinity sports. And the best part of the project has been doing oral history interviews with former players and coaches. I've interviewed over 200, with many more to come, and started with the very oldest graduates from the 1950s and 60s up to about now the 1980s. But certainly it includes a lot of people who played either baseball, football, or squash for Dan Jesse. So I want to say just a couple things about Dan based on kind of this research and these incredible conversations I've had with those who played for him. I'd especially like to thank Tony Sanders, class of '61, and Jim Witter's class of '62 for sharing some of their insights on Dan, both his biography and his amazing legacy. In the 1920s, when Dan was growing up in the West Coast, he became a master of the game, just a phenomenal athlete. He was born originally in rural Kentucky and moved out to Oregon when he was 2 years old. As we heard from the video, he became a star quarterback at the College of Pacific, and then really was a standout baseball player in the minor leagues. In 1929, he was picked up by the Cleveland Indians to replace their star shortstop, Joe Sewell, who was about to be traded to, yes, some things haven't changed, the New York Yankees. Unfortunately, Dan stepped on a sprinkler head, wrenched his knee, and his playing days were over. But for that injury, Dan Jesse would have been the starting shortstop for the Cleveland Indians. He was that good a baseball player. But the ball club's loss was Trinity's gain, for Dan went and got a master's at Columbia and then arrived at Trinity as the head football coach in 1932. The team was really struggling back then. Trinity football had only won 17 games over the previous decade, including the disastrous 1928 team, which was really the low point of Trinity football. They failed to win a single game or even to score a single point during the entire season. But Trinity had a very rich football tradition, going back to players and coaches like Harmon Graves in the 1890s or Professor Ray Gattell in the 1910s. Trinity football had earned a reputation for always punching well above its weight. The feisty bantam who could compete with and beat many colleges many times its size. Trinity was known especially as an innovator in the modern game of football, using brains, not brawn, and Dan Jesse would not only continue, but greatly enhance this reputation. In the 1930s, in addition to completely turning around Trinity's football program, Dan became a student of the game. The head of the physical education department at Columbia, Dr. Hughes, rated Dan as one of the finest students of football in the entire history of the college. And each summer, Dan would return to Columbia to take and later teach summer courses on both football and baseball. In the 40s and 50s, Dan became a teacher of the game, selected by the U.S. government to travel all over the world to give coaching clinics to U.S. service members during both World War II and the Korean conflict. But he also taught his players. Perhaps his greatest accomplishment, wrote Trinity sports historian Robert Morris, has been the training of his players to think under pressure, to outsmart their opponents. In the 50s and 60s, as Dan continued to rack up more wins, more undefeated seasons, and more All-Americans, he became a recognized guru of the game. Dan was well known as an offensive genius, and many major college coaches sought his counsel, including Woody Hayes at Ohio State, Bobby Dodd at Georgia Tech, and Ben Schwartzwater at Syracuse, just to name a few. One year, Woody Hayes sent all his assistant coaches to Trinity. They left their defense for Trinity, but they came back with Dan's offense and used it to great effect. All three of those coaches, by the way, are in the College Football Hall of Fame. But Dan's influence even extended to the professional ranks. George Smith, class of 1978, told me a story that he heard from his father, Dave Smith, who played for Dan in the late 40s and early 50s. One day before practice, Dan said, "You know, I was just down in New Haven hanging out with Red Strader, and we came up with a really good plan for the upcoming game." Well, all the players looked at each other in disbelief. Red Strader was one of the top NFL coaches at the time. So they were all like, "Sure, Dan, you were hanging out with Red Strader." Anyway, some years later, after graduation, Dave Smith got tickets to the Rose Bowl, which included an invitation to the Rose Bowl luncheon, where the guest speaker was, you guessed it, Red Strader. So Dave thought, you know what, I'm going to put this one to rest. So after the talk, he went up and introduced himself, and he said, "I played football with Dan Jesse at Trinity College." And he thought the famous coach might say, "Who?" Instead, Red Strader paused, looked at him, and said, "Dan Jesse is one of the most innovative offensive football minds in the country today." In 1966, Dan's reputation was confirmed when he was elected by his peers to the presidency of the 7,000-strong American Football Coaches Association, the first coach from a small college to be so honored. And as good as a football coach as Dan was, he was just as good, some might say even better, as a baseball coach. Dan literally wrote the book on baseball, publishing one of the first textbooks on baseball instruction in 1939. Dan could be a bit looser on the baseball field than on the football gridiron. Joe Hurahan, class of 1966, said that during one game when their right fielder was having trouble catching the fly balls, Dan, still the Kentucky farm boy, shouted from the dugout, "Hey, Clarky, you better get some straw underneath that hat. You're going to get killed out there." And who can forget about squash? Charlie Sticka is not wrong when he says that the incredible legacy of Trinity squash is due in no small measure to Dan, who taught himself the game and coached the team from the 1930s to the 1950s. But Wade Close, class of 1955, and a talented squash player, said that Dan brought a certain football attitude to the game of squash. At the time, if an opposing player got between you and the wall and you hit that player with the ball, you scored a point. This was Dan's favorite play. He advised his players to get into that position during a game, and then in a voice that could be heard echoing through the rafters of the Trowbridge Memorial Gym, Dan would shout, "Drill 'em!" I once took a journalism class taught by a newspaper publisher, and he said that the highest paid employee at the newspaper was the person who wrote the headlines. I thought of that when I saw the headline for Dan's obituary in the Hartford Courant. It read simply, "Jesse, abrasive, inventive, successful." I think that pretty well sums up Dan. He could be abrasive. When Jack Thompson, class of '58, arrived at Trinity, Charlie Sticka gave him some advice. Listen to what Dan says, not how he says it. And Dan was certainly inventive. As the famous sports columnist and Trinity grad James Murray wrote, among his fellow football coaches, he has been called the most imaginative builder of an offense in American intercollegiate football. And certainly Dan was successful. Yes, in the win column, but more importantly, as the record of his many graduates indicates, successful at developing young people to lead lives of accomplishment, of service to their country and their communities, and of devotion to their alma mater. Of Dan's many accolades, and there were many, he always said that the one that made him most proud was when the Trinity football field was named in his honor. I think that speaks to what Trinity College meant to Dan Jesse. And now, with Dan's induction into the Trinity College Hall of Fame, we can reciprocate and recognize properly what Dan Jesse meant to Trinity College. Thank you.
Now we continue on with another powerhouse of Trinity's storied football program. This honoree set single season records for receptions, receiving yards, receiving touchdowns, which stood for 45 years and still ranks in the top 10 for all of those categories. Please join me in celebrating Patrick McNamara.
Patrick McNamara was the most electrifying wide receiver in Trinity College history. Don Miller once told me Pat was the most interesting recruit ever. He said Pat was unique, and I think it was this uniqueness combined with some game time chemistry that was the catalyst of the Trinity offense to be nicknamed the Mac Attack, as we went on to win the league championship in 1978. The first game was up at Bowdoin. Pat had 2 touchdowns up there. Both of them were broken plays. Pat just pointed to the end zone, and I was able to hit them straight down the middle for touchdowns. Against Bates, we scored on the very last play of the half and the very last play of the game. Both touchdown grabs by McNamara. Final score 14-7 Trinity. 2 weeks later, we played Colby. We got the ball back with less than 2 minutes, down 3 points, and we had to go 80 yards. And again, on the very last play of the game, touchdown grab by Pat McNamara. He had 10 catches versus Coast Guard. He had 12 versus Amherst for 240 yards. And then down at Wesleyan for the league championship game, playing with a pulled hamstring, Pat had 2 touchdowns to not only put himself in the record book, but to put his quarterback in the record book. At the season, when the season was over, Pat led the nation in catches per game. He was All-American, All-New England, All-NESCAC, had school records in touchdowns, receptions, yardage in the season, among other things. So Pat, my friend, I know you can't be here in body, but knowing how unique you are, you're probably hovering around this building somewhere. So to you, to your immediate family, to your extended family, including McNamara's band, congratulations on being the latest and newest and most recent member of the Trinity College Hall of Fame.
I'd like to invite Paul Romano to the stage to say a few words about Pat.
Wow, he's a pretty good football player. I happened to be there to see most of it, if not all. First, it's my honor and privilege to accept this very special recognition. This is Mike's fault for choking me up with that video. As I said, it's my honor and privilege to accept this very special recognition on Patrick's behalf. Our friendship began in 1976 and carried on until he passed away in 2008. I'm so grateful to call him a dear friend. This will get easier, I promise. Thank you, McNamara's, including Nancy, Pat's siblings, for providing this opportunity. And of course, Travis and Wade, who I know Pat would be so proud of. I also know that Jim, I know how proud his mom, Eleanor, and stepdad, Jim, would be of his accomplishments and of this recognition. Pat had a lot of nicknames. People who are well-liked have a lot of nicknames. Pat Mack was raised in Ansonia, Connecticut, in the heart of the Naugatuck Valley. I bring most of this up because I grew up there too. He grew up in a great family and in a community that supported and looked out for each other. It really spoke to the character of who he is. His coaches and extended family meant a lot to him. He had a way of making each of his friends feel special, and as a result, assembled and enjoyed an enormous circle of friends over the years. I couldn't believe it. We would go different places, and Patrick McNamara always saw somebody he knew, and who had a special story with him and understood him. He was a heartfelt friend in every instance. He must be the only athlete whose hometown supporters assembled a kazoo band turning up on game day as McNamara's band. You've heard about that before. But it was a remarkably exciting thing to see. It brought a lot of energy to the field and gave all of the players a sense that there was a great deal of support for one of our star players, and they were fun in doing so. Patrick rejoiced in, I was going to talk about a whole bunch of different things. When I heard what Michael would be talking about, I didn't need to give you a lot of statistics. I thought more of an insight into who this guy was. Many of you know that already, but it was important to have a feel for what made Pat McNamara so unique and special, not only on the football field. Patrick rejoiced in tangling up even the best defenders with what at the time were some of the most nimble and elusive passing routes in and outside of the NESCAC. His competitiveness carried him beyond the gridiron to the golf course, the softball field, a game of pool, and naming U.S. capitals. We'd drive in the car and he'd smack me when I couldn't get one. In many ways, everything to him, the excitement and energy that came from teasing, competition, was always giving him more energy and bringing him even more into the sort of social scene that we were in at the time. He found a way to make competition out of everything, and that energy made every one of those experiences fun. His hands and ability to get to the ball were nothing short of incredible. He preferred out patterns as they gave him the best chance to show off his special skill of towing the out-of-bounds line with great precision. A skill that we later saw he passed on to both of his brothers, Tim and Terry, who loved to do that drag foot into the sideline as well. Mike Foy and other QBs who had the opportunity to toss the ball to him couldn't help but want to make him their primary, maybe exclusive target, which Pat would have been perfectly happy to support. Defensive backs all over the league were frustrated by Pat's knack for getting under their skin, and as he would say, beating them like a drum, Paulie. He loved to run by you and catch the ball. While Pat racked up recognition in the NESCAC, in the broader D3 environment, and on the national stage as a leading receiver, all divisions in 1979, he never forgot to exude confidence. He had a look that helped make it look so easy. He was calm. He was always dressed perfectly in his uniform. He would always be getting it ready before he went out on the field. And he thought that if he looked clean and it looked like it was easy, he was going to trap that defender again into thinking they could cover him, and they never could. Pat developed an aura around the league that few players in my time around Trinity football could replicate, maybe with the exception of his brothers. But we often knew the numbers of a couple guys on the other teams we were playing, but every team knew Pat. They referred to him as Pat Mack. The linebackers would say, "There's Pat Mack, get Pat Mack." He had a reputation that sort of became ubiquitous around the teams we played, and we ran into them at concerts or social settings or other places. They always wanted to meet him. And he was the guy that was beating them all the time. But they wanted to know what the magic was behind his personality, his swagger, and his way of doing things. I won't speak much about myself in this, but I played two very important roles for him at the time. He took great pleasure in leaving me in the dust every day at practice. I made it hard for him, but truth be told, he won our 2-year head-to-head battle on the practice field by a pretty wide margin. My other important role, and this one will choke me up again, my other important role is to tape his wrist before every game. He'd knock on my locker with a roll of tape, and we'd go around the corner to an empty spot in the locker room, and we'd sit on the bench facing each other, and he would just talk about what he was planning to do for the day in the game, what was on his mind, and I would tape up his wrists. And some of our best conversations happened in that 30 minutes each week before we went out on the field. I could go on for hours about this guy. And his family knows that we spent an awful lot of time together. So the important point of everything that's on my mind that I want to convey to you is he was a different character. He wasn't the fastest guy on the field, but he was the quickest. He was nimble. He got to the ball like mad, and loved to play football. He loved to play, as I said, any sport, even a parlor game. But he really put his heart and soul into the game of football, and it returned it to him in spades. He was so proud of the years that we played here. He was so proud of the relationships we built through our program. And he always felt that those years were a success story for him, as many of you probably do after seeing all these statistics tonight. He was talented and special. I'm so proud for him and his family and for this most permanent recognition, and feel very good for his family, for those of us who had a chance to play with him, a few of which are right down here in front, and just the sense that he was more to this campus than a football player. He was a center of energy that made us all feel better about our experiences, our troubles, and our enjoyments in the lives we had here. So Godspeed, my friend, and thank you so much.
If I could ask Pat's siblings, who are all here tonight, as well as his immediate family, to come up and accept his trophy. We're going to take a brief break for dinner service, and then we'll be back in a little bit with our next 3 inductees. We're going to get started with our next 3 inductees, so please keep finishing up your dinners and we'll move on in our evening. Our next inductee was a 4-time All-American. He won 2 College Squash Association singles titles in 1997, 1998. Also led the Bantams to their first 2 CSA team crowns in 1999 and 2000. Please join me in honoring Marcus Cowie.
Well, Marcus was a 2-time World Junior runner-up. He was the number 2 junior in the world. And also his mom coached him, and his mom was the English national coach for over 20 years. She was a legend. I knew on a personality level we had landed someone that was bigger than life. And from a squash standpoint, we knew he was very good, but we just didn't know what that meant. There had been international players that have come here over the years, but they came because they chose the school or whatever. But this was the first really recruiting war land at Trinity College. He would have been the Roger Federer of squash at his time. He was the man. But he wanted a college education because he saw the value of that. He was an insatiable appetite for the college experience. But when he would come to practice, those practices were unbelievably intense. For that period of time when he was in the house, everybody saw what greatness demands and what level of intensity you have to bring to the plate. His racket work was impeccable. It was magic. It was a wand in his hand, and he had this incredible competitiveness. He viewed the game as mano-y-mano. It was, I'm against you, and I'm going to beat you, and I'm going to crush you. Well, he was a two-time national champion. He was the first national champion at Trinity College, at least in squash. And it was like everything Marcus did, it was with panache and dramatic. We were playing the singles championships up at Dartmouth, and he was playing a fellow from Harvard who was his nemesis all through the juniors. And they were having a battle out there. And in the second game, Marcus took a dive and really badly bruised his hip. For a few points, he was dragging his leg behind him, but he just wasn't going to give in. And then he won the national championship. It was otherworldly.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Marcus Cowie.
All righty. Well, good evening, everyone. Firstly, it really is so good to be here. I feel incredibly honored. It's such a big occasion, and it's good to connect with some people over here that I've only ever known through WhatsApp, so great. Thank you, Trinity College. Thank you, Trinity Squash, for this induction. It is a great honor, and I do feel very, very proud. To think that it's almost 30 years since I first touched down on Trinity soil, and almost 25 years since I've actually been here since the last time, is mind-boggling. Time goes so quickly. For those of you who don't know, when I arrived here in the fall of 1996, Trinity was going through a bit of a transformation period. It probably had a little bit of an ivory tower identity. And the institution needed to reach out into the neighborhood, to connect with the neighborhood, and to revitalize the neighborhood. And it did that in my period when I was here. And that was the brainchild of Evan Dobell, president from 96 to, I think, 2003 something. Evan and Kitty, by the way, honestly, it's so good that you could be here. Thank you so much. It really is an honor. So Evan embraced the urban landscape and used academic institutions to change the urban landscape. And it basically gave Trinity a new national identity for doing that. Forget about squash. This was just about improving the identity of Trinity College as a first choice school. And that was something that probably hadn't been there for some time. The transformation began in many ways in that time. And so me coming to Trinity Squash, which was just a tiny little piece in this puzzle, it felt more to me than just building the squash program. It felt that I was a part of this transformation and then this transitional period. And Evan saw squash, just like he does with everything. He saw it as a mechanism to boost the identity even more, because we were the only sport that were playing against the Ivies. And we had a chance to actually beat the Ivies, which is what we did. Those first few years, first couple of years when I was here. I loved that. So I came, I gave my experience and expertise in the game of squash on technique and strategy, training, building the team, building the program, and the women's program as well, was all kind of a part of my experience and my reason for being here. It wasn't just about winning, it was building something better. And the profile of Trinity Squash was gathering in the school, but it was also gathering wider than Trinity. The sport of squash was growing in the country, in your USA, and we were a part of that here at Trinity. And I was so fortunate. I mean, I'd been playing squash all over the world for squash audiences, right? The only people that were watching me were squash people. When I came here, people were watching me that didn't know anything about squash. My best mates in the dorm rooms, they hadn't even heard of the game. And they were there week in, week out, watching me do what I did best at the time. So for me, it was such an honor to showcase the sport that I loved to thousands of people. It was really, really a truly great honor. And I'll never forget the time when there's almost, you can pinpoint the transformation that happened in the squash program was around about February 1998. And it became clear that around that time, squash was the event to be. It was the social must-be at event on the social calendar. Doesn't matter who you were, doesn't matter if you knew the sport, everyone was going to that game. So I take you back, please, to February the 4th, 1998. Somebody's 21st birthday. Trinity versus Harvard, third floor Ferris Athletic Center, Saturday evening. This was the place to be that night. Even people who didn't want to be there were there. Over 2,000 people, I'm not joking, were at that Ferris Athletic Center with the smell of victory in the air. I was playing at the #1 spot, and I was two love up, and playing against, I think Coach mentioned it in the VT, against my rival at the time, Daniel Ezra from Harvard. I was killing him. 2 love up, feeding from the crowd, loving it. My parents even flew in for this one. Match ball up, serving, look at my racket, there's a broken string. Go and change your racket, right? So I go to the court to open the door to change my racket. I couldn't open the door. The fans' feet were blocking the door. And I looked out, and my racket bag was around the corner where the water fountain was. And I thought, it's gonna take 3-4 minutes, like minimum, to get my new racket. And I didn't want the momentum to go because I was feeling it. So I closed the door, I served, and he hit the error into the tin, and the place erupted. Now, I didn't know it at the time, but that match put us at 5 wins, which was the first time Trinity College beat Harvard University at squash. You all probably know Paul Asiante. He's kind of like a god around here now. right? And he's had to leave, unfortunately. But what he carried on in the sport, and I'm sure many of you know, what he did, they won for 13 years non-losing, which became known in national sports news as the streak. And it's still to this day, the men's squash Trinity team are the winningest sports team in college sports history. And for me, the fact that he's carried that on makes my part that I played even more proud for myself. So it's so good to be here on campus. I've walked up and down and reminisced, showed videos to my daughters. It's so good to have seen Paul and Evan and Kitty. I am thrilled and truly honored to be here. Thank you, Trinity College. Thank you, Trinity Squash.
And now we celebrate one of the architects of Trinity Athletics. This individual served as the basketball and track and field coach, as well as was the longtime athletic director. He was the first coach from a small college to serve as president of the National Association of Basketball Coaches in 1956. Please join me in celebrating Ray Oosting. Trinity luminary Ray Oosting, originally from Grand Rapids, Michigan, graduated from Springfield College in the class of 1924, where he competed in both basketball and track. Skilled in both sports, Oosting earned all New England honors on the hardwood and set an Eastern Intercollegiate Track Association record in the 220-yard dash. After graduating from Springfield, Oosting joined the Trinity College Athletic Department as both basketball and track coach. He coached basketball for 32 years, track for 20, and also guided freshman football and cross country. He won 253 games as the basketball coach. In 1956, Oosting became the first coach from a small college to become president of the National Basketball Coaches Association. Oosting was awarded with the Eastern College Athletic Conference's James Lina Memorial Award for outstanding service to intercollegiate athletics and was a Gold Key recipient of the Connecticut Sports Writers Alliance. Although he retired in 1966, Oosting's impact is still felt on Trinity athletics today. He's known as the architect of Trinity's athletic programs and is also credited with the development of Lower Campus into our athletic fields. His name graces our gymnasium, and we are proud to call Oosting Gymnasium home to our basketball and volleyball teams. It's an honor to induct Ray Oosting into the Trinity Athletics Hall of Fame. First, I'd like to invite current men's basketball coach James Cosgrove to speak for a few moments on Ray's impact on our program.
Thank you, Drew. Appreciate being here, and it's quite an honor to, first of all, be at Trinity College and serve as your men's basketball coach. This place is truly, truly special, and just the love that people have for our athletics and our school is unbelievable, and you don't find this at most places. So this is truly a remarkable place, and I'm very honored to be here. And I'm more honored to be speaking on behalf of Ray Oosting. Ray was a tremendous, tremendous coach and administrator, and was a tremendous player. Playing at Springfield College, he had a bunch of honors at Springfield in basketball and in track and field, and that was 1923, 1922, 1921, about 30 years after the game was invented at Springfield College. So he was, I'm sure, involved with people who knew, worked with, played for the great James Naismith, who invented our terrific sport. So the legacy that Ray has just as a player is unbelievable. Playing at Springfield at that time, which was one of the top collegiate programs in the country, and to also be a great track and field star also is truly unbelievable. Ray comes to Trinity in 1924 and is the basketball coach till 1957. I'm just going to give you a few stats of what he did when he was here. In the 20s, think about this. In the 20s, he had teams that were 10-4. In the 30s, he had teams that were 11-1, 10-2, 9-3. That's the equivalent of winning 30 games now. And he did that basically 3 years in a row in the 30s. In the 40s, he had teams 8-4. In the 50s, he had teams 14-3, 14-5, and 15-6. So back then, they probably played a third of the games that we play now, and he amassed 250 plus victories, which equivalent today would probably be about 600 or 700 victories, which is unfathomable in our sport. It's just really, really unbelievable. He also was the track and field and cross country coach for more than 25 years, and was the athletic director. So I don't know if President Berger Sweeney is still here, but he basically did about 5 of our jobs all on his own. So she might look around and say, why do I need all you guys? Why do I need all you guys going around? But, oh, she is here, so I hope you didn't hear that, President Berger Sweeney. But I just want to say it's quite an honor to be the basketball coach here and follow in the footsteps of the great Ray Oosting. And we go in that gym every day and we work, and we always say, we're meeting in Oosting 3 o'clock. Make sure you're in Oosting at 3 o'clock. And now it has so much more meaning and so much more intention for us and purpose for us that I actually shared with my team about him. And I'm very, very honored to be speaking on his behalf. And I'm very, very honored to be the basketball coach here at Trinity College. Thank you.
I'd like to invite Ray's grandson, Bob Muensberg, to say a few words, as well as Ray's great-granddaughter, Lauren McBriar, and great-great-granddaughter, Tave Muensberg, both graduates of Trinity, to come accept his award.
Thank you all very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and on behalf of my family, this is a great honor, and we really appreciate it. I was told to keep this to 2 or 3 minutes, but the prior speakers kind of went on and on. So I thought I'd start by talking about academics here at Trinity College. I remember the first time when my daughter started coming here. I think it was 1998 or 1999. She graduated in '03. Evan Dobell was the president at the time. Is Evan still here? Yes, sir. And you gave the parent welcome speech and made reference to the phrase of welcome to Trinity College, the cruise ship Trinity College. I can appreciate that. It's a great place, and the kids are treated very well here. Great-granddaughter, Ray's great-great-great-granddaughter, Tave, graduated here just last year in 2023. And he'd be real proud that the girls came here and did and really got a great education. So one thing that I've noticed here is that it's a hall full of athletes, great athletes. And I think all of us who aren't athletes know those people that were always good at everything, every single conceivable sport. So I remember being a teenager, 20s and 30s, and I'd challenge my grandfather. We called him Beep. I'd challenge him to play a little golf, ping pong, play horse in the driveway. Whether he was in his 70s or 80s, he would always find a way to win. He had a real twinkle in his eye, and as a prior speaker said, as an athlete and as a great coach, he had a way of getting under an opponent's skin. this hall reminds me of his favorite story he told about his career at Trinity. And if you could just throw yourself back to perhaps 1937, 38, he was the basketball coach. And he loved beating the Ivies. I believe the game was at Yale. And as I like to recall the story, it was a dark and stormy night, he'd say. And it was a huge arena, whatever that was at the time, for Yale's basketball. And you had mentioned, Coach, the record that he had these various years, 10-4, 9-1, 9-4. I think those reflected the scores of basketball games back in the day, the dead ball era and the peach baskets. But in any event, it was a dark and stormy night, and Trinity was getting thrashed by those haughty Yaleys. And halftime came, and there was a depressed locker room, and everybody's all just bummed out. The coach was trying to motivate them and tried to give them some kind of a let's go speech in the Bantam spirit. And they came out after halftime. The place was packed. And all of a sudden, baskets of Bantam roosters were released from the rafters, and they came down onto the crowd. Pandemonium ensued. The Yale coach was apoplectic, lost his mind. Well, of course, the end of the story he'd always say was, we beat him. We beat him at the end. Got right under their skin. So my grandfather, Ray, we called him Beepa. He was a gentleman. Coach, I'm hoping that you maintain the tradition of keeping a jacket and tie on the sidelines all the time. Critical. Beepa was dapper, a gentleman at all times. And another very, very fond memory was I was probably in my 30s. Again, this was 35 years ago, so there's a real generation gap going on here. But I was a young man in my 30s, and he lived in a condo right next to St. Joseph's in his later years, and he'd call in, and Coach Stan Ogrodnik would always invite him to come to games. And when I would go down and visit him and maybe sleep over just to kind of be with him and keep in touch, occasionally we'd go to a game together, and people would always say, now don't make a big deal out of it, no big deal, I don't want any attention. So Ogrodnik, every single time we'd meet him at the door, we'd go into the Ray Houston Gymnasium, they'd make a big PA announcement on the system, and Ogrodnik would have all of his players come over and shake his hand, and there was a tremendous tradition, and it just is the testament to this whole Trinity athletic community. So from the bottom of our hearts, thank you very much for this great honor, and we sincerely appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you to Bob and the Oosting family for joining us tonight. Our next inductee is a true pioneer for women's athletics at Trinity College. I promise you that the list I'm about to give is actually accurate. She was a member of cross country, track and field, basketball, swimming and diving, and softball, and was also instrumental in the creation of women's swimming and diving, cross country, and softball teams. Ladies and gentlemen, Linear Drew.
Linear played 5 sports. Hartford Current then referred to her as the Babe Dietrichson of Trinity College. She not only played 5 sports, she excelled in all of them, and she excelled in the classroom. We're talking about somebody who's putting in 4 or 5 plus hours a day. And I would look up from the sideline, and Coach McPhee would be like this, tapping his watch, meaning her relay was coming up, her event was coming up, he needed her now. So substitute her out, she tears out the door, she goes up the stairwell and strips off her basketball uniform, gets on the block, swims, gets back out, puts her basketball uniform on, comes back out, and gets on the court. Dripping a little water, I dare say, but back on the court. And I still remember Woody Anderson was a longtime sports editor for the Hartford Courant, and one of his greatest headlines was, he called her the Clark Kent of women's athletics, that she went into a stairwell on the roof and came out a superwoman. And his headline was, Trinity Superwoman leaps from sport to sport. And that really was Lanier Drew.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Lanier Drew.
The lights are bright. Wow, it's exciting to be standing up here. Before I get started with my remarks, I wanted to say a couple of things. First of all, Leanne, your speech earlier tonight was a home run, so in case you didn't realize that. And second, Marcus, I would like to thank you for being transformational in the squash arena, because I have a lot of friends at home that went to Ivy League schools, and I get to constantly check the squash scores and rub it in. So thank you very much. One final thing I'd like to say is I think I have the most inductees at my table, and I know Drew didn't mean to, but he forgot one of them. Denise Jones is at my, Ciara is at my table too, so I have Robin and Rick and Denise at my table, so thank you. It's really hard to stand up here and tell you how humbled and honored I am to be receiving this award. I looked at reviewed the list of inductees this year and prior years, and I thought, oh wow, I'm not sure I stand up to some of these incredible athletes and coaches in terms of their contributions, because I feel like I was on the very early end of the sports here. So I'd like to thank, in particular, Denise Jones-Ciara, who nominated me and had tireless advocacy to get me into this Hall of Fame. So thank you very much, Denise. I'm especially honored also to be joining my fellow classmate Pat McNamara in this special honor. I'm very sad that Pat could not be here with me to double the number of inductees in the class of 1980 to 4. So the first was Denise in 2022. The second one was Sue Proctor last year for her incredible rowing prowess. And then now with Pat and Lanier, we are at 4. I checked with a very reliable source to find out if that was the most inductees for any one class, because I'm still a little competitive. And the reliable source, Bertie, told me that we are now tied with the class of 1985 for the most inductees. So shout out to the class of 1980. We need one more. It's also very special that I'm being inducted with Hannah Brickley tonight. Until last night, I had not met Hannah, but I met her last night at the volleyball game. And it's very special to me because her mother, Cindy Higgins Brickley, played basketball with me, and she was one of my favorite basketball teammates. And she is also from the class of 1980, like I said, and her father, as we all know, was one of the inaugural inductees to the Hall of Fame in 2019. So, Hannah, I just want to say congratulations, and I don't know how you could have, I understand how you're such a stellar person and athlete because you started with some pretty good DNA. So how did I get to Trinity College from Jacksonville, Florida? When I started searching for colleges, I decided I wanted to go to the Northeast because I had a good friend that had gone to Williams the year before. And so I was putting together my list of colleges where I was looking, and my college advisor looked at my list and he said, well, why don't you have Trinity College on that list? And I said, well, I've never heard of Trinity College. And he said, it just so happened, fate has it, that he was a 1971 graduate of Trinity College. And so he convinced me to put Trinity College on my list. So I put it on my list, started applying, sent off my applications. And as I was starting to get my acceptances, somewhere along the line, I found out that my two favorite sports from high school, basketball and swimming, I played some other sports, but those were the two that I wanted to continue in college for sure. I found out in the Northeast, they are in the same season, winter. In Florida, they're in two separate seasons. So I kind of panicked because I couldn't imagine going away to college and not being able to play my two sports. So my college counselor said, just, contact the coaches at the schools you've been accepted at and ask them if you can play two sports in one season. So this is 1975, 75-ish, I think. So you write letters back then. You didn't know texting or email or anything like that. So I got my little letters out and wrote these coaches. And two of the coaches, Princeton and Yale, said, absolutely not. You just need to swim. You can't possibly do two sports. But Trinity and Williams, well, the Williams coach was very nice. He wrote me a nice letter back and said, check with your friend at Williams. I think you can do it, but you'll have to manage it. And here at Trinity, Chet McPhee picked up the phone and called me. And so, as you might imagine, if you know Chet, that sealed the deal. One phone call from Chet McPhee. The following fall, I was at Trinity College, so that's how I got here. It really was the right decision for me. The only problem is I didn't have a fall sport, so we'll get to that. So I had to wait till winter, and at wintertime I had four plus hours of workouts. It was 2 hours of swimming, followed by 2 hours of basketball. If I had to do it over, I would reverse that because I got the worst set of shin splints ever because I got out of the pool, it was all loosey-goosey, and then I had to go pound on the basketball court for 2 hours. But it really was the right decision for me. I fell in love with my coaches and teammates, and Ferris, I found my people at Ferris Athletic Center, basically, and made me very happy. So I'm very proud to be considered a pioneer and called a pioneer, and have been a part of the development and advancement of a couple of my sports to varsity level status from its very infancy. But it's hard for me to understand it was hard for me to understand when I was here that I was a pioneer because I was just playing my sports. I just loved sports and I just went out there and played them. But one of the things that's interesting is today I don't think it's possible to do 5 sports in college. Because today everybody seems to have to specialize really early on, pick a sport, pick 2 sports, that's about all you can do. But one of the special things about Trinity for me was that because I could play so many sports, I discovered my best sport when I was here at Trinity. I was not a runner when I came to Trinity. As I told you before, my 2 main sports. And my basketball coach, I'm going to have to give credit to 2 coaches sitting at my table. My basketball coach extraordinaire, Robin Shepard, with a little help from Drew Highland, she decided that we had to run 2 miles every day for basketball fitness. And Cindy will remember this as well. And so right here in this field house, ironically, I logged 20 laps. I think it was 10 laps to the mile. Is that right, Cindy? 20 laps around this field house, every single day for Robin. And somewhere along the way, I decided I actually liked running. I didn't tell Robin that, but I actually liked the running. And so I played softball that spring, but came back in the fall and I thought, I like running and I don't have anything to do in the fall, so what should I do? And another friend of mine, Kathy Schlein, and I decided we're going to start the cross-country team. So the two of us went to the coaches. There were no female coaches for cross-country, but we went to the male coaches and said, can we run with the guys? And they said, sure. They put us in a couple of meets as individuals because you have to have at least 5 to make a team. We didn't have a team. And that was the beginning stages of cross-country here at Trinity College. And I actually still have my singlet, which I thought you saw in one of the pictures. I still have it. It's very heavy, and it's not what they wear today. But I obviously liked it enough to hang on to it. So I don't know if Miss Ruby knew I took this, Robin. So, like I said, I played softball, and then the next spring I thought, well, I really like running, so Rick probably convinced me to come out for a track team instead of doing softball. The only mistake that Rick made is you saw the picture of me throwing the javelin. That was probably the day that I pulled my groin muscle, because I was not a very good javelin thrower. But Rick thought I needed to do more than running, so he tried me in javelin. After that, I stuck to running. So everybody has incredible memories of games and points and times and everything. I don't remember any of that, you guys. I think it's because I've been gone a long time, and maybe I just don't have a memory of it because I just love sports. But the most important thing to me was my family at Ferris Athletic Center, because truly they were my family. If I wasn't playing my sports, I was down in Unit D playing with Craig and Rick pickup basketball. If I wasn't doing that, I was running with a bunch of professors at lunchtime. So it really, truly was my home while I was here. And you might think, wow, she did so many sports, how did she possibly study? But believe it or not, I studied hard enough to be a Phi Beta Kappa classics major. Thank you, Dr. McCrow and Bradley and Williams for that. And I really did love my academics, but spent a whole lot more time at Ferris than I did in the library. So 44 years later, I have to say, I feel still surrounded by the same special group that was here when I was here. I mean, I have all my coaches, Robin, Chet, Drew, Rick, Sue McCarthy, Bill Schultz, Jane Millspaw. I mean, the list just goes on and on. I mean, all those people, I still love them and remember them, and I'm in contact with quite a few of them, which is pretty special. So I guess I would just like to say that sports meant everything to me here at Trinity. For my coaches and my friends Cindy and Denise, who are both here for me tonight in my different sports. And thank you, Kristen, for standing in for my beloved Chet, because without Chet, I wouldn't have been here. So I owe a great debt to Chet for getting me here, and a great debt. I regret that my father can't be here because he was my biggest sports fan, and I owe a great debt to him for his love, sharing his love of sports with me, and also for his genetics, because he was a really good athlete too. So when I left Trinity, sports continued to just inform my life. I became much more serious as a runner, started training really hard, and started competing at a much higher level. I actually qualified for the 1984 first ever women's Olympic marathon trials, which was pretty special. If any of you ever followed running, Joan Benoit is still my hero. She went to Bowdoin, and she was the first qualifier at the trials, and then went on to win the Olympics in 1984. So that's very special to me. I competed for about 20 years, every distance from 5K to the marathon, and then also during this time I coached a lot because I loved coaching, and I loved my coaches, and they taught me so much. So I've coached basketball, swimming, cross country, track and field. I started a chapter of Girls on the Run in Jacksonville, if any of you are familiar with that program. And honestly, I have to say that, inspiring young athletes to do well and watching their achievements is almost as good, if not better, than all the athletic achievements that I have had. So, in closing, I would just like to thank Trinity College for everything that they have done for me. Sport that I learned here, or that I developed here, has taught me so many lessons in life, and it just continues to bring me such joy. It continues to also give me friendships and community everywhere I go. I mean, my big set of friends now revolves around sports. So thank you, Trinity, for being an important and integral part of my life's journey. and for this incredible honor. I am truly humbled, and I thank you. Go Bantams.
We're going to take a brief break for dessert service, and then we'll have our final two inductees. Our next inductee was a giant on the lacrosse field. He achieved All-American status in 1992, still stands as the program's leader in career points, career goals, and career assists. Please join me in honoring Ryan Martin.
Lacrosse was a burgeoning sport at that time. Ryan was lucky enough to start playing lacrosse in third grade. Unheard of at that time. He was so much further ahead of almost everybody on the team. There was a few others that had been playing for a long time, but he just had so much more experience. Ryan was not the fastest player. He was not the biggest player. He was not the tallest player. But his intensity, Ryan, being offensive-minded, being an attackman, when he rode the defense, when they were trying to get it up, it was like a man possessed. He never gave up on anything.
He was very good at creating space for himself, get into a position to get the ball, and finish the play.
His stick work was by far greater than anybody's on the team. Ryan was head and shoulders above all of us, and that carried through all 4 years. Trinity lacrosse, up until both Ryan and I's freshman, sophomore, even junior year, lacrosse was an afterthought. It wasn't that intensive a game. Our senior year flipped the tide. Most of that was on the heels of Ryan carrying us through, whether he knew it or not. Ryan's leadership came in the form of everybody wanted to bring their level to Ryan. He raised the team's level at every corner. He didn't yell at people. He wasn't rah-rah. He rose to the occasion and certainly got intensive. But if you weren't on the same level as Ryan or reaching for that level, you were going to be left behind. So when Ryan was rolling, Trinity lacrosse was rolling.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ryan Martin.
That's the first time I've seen that video. That's great, and thank you for making me go after the 5 Sport Phi Beta Kappa. That's good. I got a tall order to fill. First, I'd like to thank Drew Galbraith and the Hall of Fame Selection Committee for this great honor. In particular, I'd like to acknowledge committee member Rick Hazelton. Rick was the athletic director during my time at Trinity. He also served as an assistant coach for the lacrosse team, and Rick and Ann Hazelton have done so much for Trinity Athletics. Thank you very much, Rick and Ann. Thank you also to Brenna Smith. Thank you for organizing this event, taking care of our families, as well as Jacob Johnson for putting together these tribute videos. It's both of you have made this such a special evening for us and all of our families. Thank you very much. When I sat down to think about my time at Trinity and what I wanted to say tonight, I realized that my being up here is really a convergence of several life events and people who influenced me along the way, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank some of those people. My path to Trinity started in the fall of 1987, there's really three people who are primarily responsible for me ending up at Trinity, because in '87 I was a senior at Avon Old Farms. I played football, hockey, and lacrosse, and at the time my goal was to play Division I lacrosse. I was committed. I use that term loosely. I was committed to the University of New Hampshire. My commitment was basically something that amounted to like a preferred walk-on, but I wanted to play Division I lacrosse, and my football coach at Avon, Kevin Driscoll, kept encouraging me to look at schools where I could play both football and lacrosse. And my kids are here tonight, and they laugh at me when I say that I played football, but place kickers are football players too, guys. So Kevin Driscoll, he drove me to my football recruiting visit here. I didn't want to go, but he made me go. And after that, I think the important part was he kept selling me on what a great fit it was for me for athletics and academics. And I think probably more importantly, I think Kevin did a really good job of selling Trinity on me, which I thought was pretty special. You know, next is obviously Mike Darr. In addition to being the head lacrosse coach, Coach Darr was on the football staff, but I think, let's be honest, I don't think the place kicker is a very important recruit, and I think Mike Darr, the football coach, or Trinity football, would not have been disappointed if I went in another direction. But Mike stayed in touch with me. He came to watch me play that spring. He kept selling me on the idea of Trinity lacrosse and Trinity education, and but not for Mike Darr, I would not have come here. So thank you very much, Mike. I'm not sure if Mike's here tonight. I haven't seen him yet. And the third person, and definitely the most influential, was my mom, because in the spring of my senior year, I still wasn't convinced that I wasn't going to try to be a Division I lacrosse player. And before, I had been accepted at Trinity, but I hadn't made my decision yet. And I remember my mom at one point acting rather frustrated. She just looked at me and said, "Are you nuts? Like, you're going to pass up a Trinity education? You're not going to be a professional lacrosse player." So I said, "All right." So mother knows best. And in the fall of 1988, I arrived on campus. My football career at Trinity lasted basically 2 days, if you count the equipment issue day. The first day I went out to practice, and as a place kicker, you were relegated to another field. You didn't really practice with the team. And in high school, I was a wide receiver also, but I wasn't good enough to do that here. And I wasn't really enjoying being just a place kicker. But more importantly, when I walked out that day, I went by the lacrosse field, and they were having captain's practices, and that was something I wasn't used to, being able to play lacrosse for more than just the spring season, and I realized that's where I wanted to be. So the next day I went in and told Coach Miller that I was quitting. I don't even know if he knew who I was, but I said I wouldn't be back, and the next day I went out for my first fall ball captain's practice. And by the way, I had some shivers walking in here tonight through the maze. Like, this used to be the place where we tried out every year for lacrosse, because with the weather outside, we didn't have that nice turf field. In February in Connecticut, lacrosse opened up every year in here, and as I walked down the maze to get in here, I'm like, oh, this brings back some memories. So when I think about what defined me as a player, I'd like to think that part of my success was due to my work ethic and my desire to compete. I think these character traits were instilled in me by my parents at a young age, but when it came to sports, probably more specifically by my dad. And anybody that knows me or played sports with me through high school or college knows that my dad was always there on the sidelines. You saw him in the video there wearing usually a Trinity hat or his famous orange Hobart hat. And my dad was one of my first coaches, but not in lacrosse. He coached me in 8U soccer, and he didn't know a thing about soccer, but what he did know was about hard work and preparation. I remember that year we had a practice, and it was kind of cold outside, and not a lot of fun in general for 8-year-olds playing soccer. And at the end of practice, he brought the team together, and he gave us a speech on, you practice like you play. That was one of his big things. You practice like you play. And I'm sure we all looked around like, I don't even know what he's talking about. You practice like you play. And but it was something that I probably heard hundreds of times throughout my athletic career. He was a big believer in doing the little things each day in practice and competing and getting ready for games. And I tried to carry that philosophy with me throughout my athletic career. And my dad definitely helped guide me and had a huge impact on me, and he's got a lot to do with me standing up here. He passed away in 2012, but I know he's looking down on me tonight. So. I didn't think it was going to be that hard. To my coaches at Trinity, thank you for pushing me. Thank you for holding me accountable. I've worked in professional sports now for close to 20 years, and I've worked with a lot of coaches. And in my field, I have a real appreciation for people who can build teams and develop players, and probably more importantly, manage egos. And I think Mike Darr was great at that. He was great at recruiting athletes and putting those people in positions to be successful on the field. And I think one of Mike's greatest strengths as a coach was also that he surrounded himself with great assistant coaches that complemented his skill set. And we had some excellent assistant coaches during my time here, but two in particular I'd like to mention. First is the late Chris Coughlin. Chris was a grad assistant here my freshman year. He played football and lacrosse at Washington and Lee, and he was the toughest, grittiest person that I ever met. I was telling somebody at my table tonight, he joined the Army at 41 years old. I think he was like a month or two shy of the age cutoff to allowed to be joined, so he could go defend our country. He was killed in Afghanistan in 2009. He's a true hero and a warrior. I'm going to give his foundation a plug. He was a big workout guy, and when he passed away, his family started a foundation called Catch a Lift. It helps thousands of post 9/11 combat injured veterans regain their mental and physical health through gym memberships, home gym equipment. And so anyway, it's online if you want to donate. I'm sure they'd appreciate it, but thank you, Chris. And second, I'd say the most influential assistant coach for me was Chris Weber. Chris coached me my last 2 years at Trinity, and when Chris arrived at Trinity, he had just finished his playing career at Springfield, and Springfield was the team we could never beat. They were brash, they were cocky, they were full of swagger. They were the type of team that expected to win, and that's, somebody said to me one time, like, don't you hate Springfield? And I didn't hate Springfield. I was actually envious of what they had and what they were, and that's what Chris brought with him to Trinity. He helped me develop that as an athlete. I loved playing for Chris. I played with him after college and summer league tournaments, and he didn't coach me a long time, but he had a real profound impact on me and my development as an athlete and a person. And Chris and his wife Heather made the trip down tonight. Thank you very much for coming. It means a lot to me. To my teammates, I'm up here tonight for having posted individual statistics, but I would not have had the success that I did without great teammates I played with over the years. First and foremost, the defensemen that practiced against me every day, Matt Woods, Jason Massey, Jeff Dempsey, to name a few. I heard Matt was here earlier tonight. I missed him, but they would always force me to do more one-on-ones after practice, especially Jason Massey chirping me for every time he got the better of me, and that was probably more times than I care to remember. I played with a lot of good players here. There was three in particular that meant a lot to me. They were in a picture up in the video, the four of us together. They were guys that, we were really close on and off the field. We ate all our meals together. We traveled to games. We lived together on the road. And we were in a text string maybe a month or so ago, and I think it was Tad that wrote in the text, we were four different people that just gelled and came together during lacrosse season, and that was really what summed it up best. And one of them's here tonight, Jeff Agopian, great captain, the hardest worker day in and day out, taught me to be a way better leader. He was super positive, way more positive than I was. There's a reason he was the two-time captain of our team, great player. Tom Skull, who's not here tonight, but Tom was a guy that played hockey and lacrosse, seemingly never had a day off. He went from one sport to the next, just a true competitor, loved life. And then, of course, Tad, who I'm honored that he did my video. He did a great job. I met Tad my freshman year. We became great friends and teammates. Tad tells it a little differently in the video. He was very nice to me, but he was The reason I respected Tad so much is he was one of the few guys that had the guts to call me out when I needed to hear it. I sometimes wasn't always as patient as I needed to be with teammates, and he taught me great lessons about leadership and leading through positivity. And so, again, really appreciate Tad doing that video. It means a lot to me. I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention a few of my friends that made the trip down tonight. Not people that I played with, but guys that were a big part of my time at Trinity. Kevin Kavanaugh, Tom Prez, Rob Hayes, Jeff McDonald, Matt Duffy, Mikey Taylor came down, Joe Porto, former teammates. Thank you very much for coming out. James Lane, thank you very much for coming out. It means a lot to me, guys. Appreciate it. And finally, I'm up here tonight because of my accomplishments as a lacrosse player at Trinity, and this is supposed to be about my time at Trinity. I've always been a big believer that not only is sports a metaphor for life, but I think sports can teach us a lot about life. And certainly the lessons I learned on the lacrosse field at Trinity, I've carried with me into the professional world. I've been fortunate to work in pro sports for most of my adult life, and even more fortunate to have had some success and won some championships, a Stanley Cup, 2 Calder Cups for American Hockey League championships, and I know that I would not have the success in my professional career as an executive without my wonderful family supporting me every step of the way. First, my wife Candace, early in my career, she stopped practicing law so I could pursue my dream job. She made sure the kids got to all their sporting events, their school activities, stayed on top of their grades, made sure they ate well. I was the guy that took them out to restaurants every night. She was the one that actually made the meals. We have 2 incredible kids, and almost entirely due to my wife and all her hard work. She's the rock of our family. I love you. And speaking of those 2 incredible kids, Ava and Cam, Ava is a senior here at Trinity, graduating in May. Very exciting. We can't wait to see what you're going to accomplish in the next chapter of your life. And Cam is a junior at Avon, doing incredibly well in the classroom, on the athletic fields, and the hockey rink. Thank you for being the biggest Rangers fan. I love your passion, bud. And in closing, to the Hall of Fame committee, thank you again for this tremendous honor.
Our final inductee this evening was a major part of our volleyball program in the last decade. Individual is one of only 4 players in program history to amass 1,000 kills and 1,000 digs. Also ranks 2nd in kills, 5th all-time in digs, and 6th in attack percentage. Please join me in celebrating Hannah Brickley.
When I think of Hannah Brickley, I think competitor. Steady and reliable and a workhorse. Like, she was going to get it done. And the hardest worker you could ever ask for. Consistent, reliable presence on the floor for 6 rotations. As an outside hitter, in the game of volleyball, you're also in the serve-receive, meaning when the other team's serving, they could target you. And they often did. And I found out later from opposing coaches that they would target Hannah in an attempt to tire her out, to wear her down. And it completely backfired. So they're just serving her, and she's just passing and hitting, and just getting it done. And they're taking this tact of, if we keep going at her, we can wear her out. And I'm on the sideline going, this is great, keep serving her, because that's exactly who we want them to serve, because she's really good.
I mean, it's obvious if you just went to a volleyball game that she's super athletic. So she's coming into basketball extremely rusty. Even though she was a college athlete, she didn't play basketball for 2 years. She was physical, she was strong. She was like strong like bull, right? Her senior year, we had plays by color. So for example, green meant go, while purple, P, purple, post. it meant feed the post. Really what it meant was feed Hannah. What's a color that starts with an H? It really should have been that, right? Because everybody knew that purple meant post, but really it meant give Hannah the basketball in the post and let her do her thing.
She was instrumental in our success in many of those years. Just a steady, consistent, reliable presence on the floor. And she just, like I said, she made everybody around her better because of who she was.
Like, she had a work ethic like none other. She made sure that everybody was having fun. Just her whole demeanor, her work ethic, just who she was as a human. Like, she was just an amazing human being.
Ladies and gentlemen, Hannah Brickley.
Hello. I don't know who let me go after a Rangers fan, but go Bruins, number one. Number two, I just wanted to start off by saying thank you to everyone that's here tonight. Thank you to the Hall of Fame committee and the athletic director, Drew, and everyone that made this possible. Brenna Smith, who I've been emailing back and forth about tickets and tables, because if you can't tell, I always have an entourage with me. And just everyone behind the scenes. We're almost there, so I try not to go too long. I've been waiting for my first glass of wine too, so I'm gonna wrap this up. But I just wanted to say a few words about the people that have helped and guided me along the way. I don't know if you guys have been to any Trinity gatherings or ceremonies before, but probably 99% sure you've probably heard my father, George Brickley, give a speech. He's known for somehow getting the microphone at every event, no matter if he's asked to or not. So I'll try to measure up to one of those speeches. I might not have as many dad jokes, but I'll try my best. But honestly, I'm truly honored to be inducted into the Hall of Fame, and specifically this class. As you've heard, everyone before me, amazing athletes in Lanier Drew, who basically started every women's sport here at Trinity. People that played professionally, all of these things. The man who the court I played in for 4 years, or the gymnasium I played in for 4 years. So I'm not really sure if my resume really stands up to the rest of these athletes, but I just want to say thank you to them and kind of paving that way, especially for women's sports and Trinity athletics in general, and kind of letting me ride along your coattails and be a part of this class. I was totally shocked when I got the call from Drew about the Hall of Fame. I never really imagined being inducted at all. And honestly, my first thought was they must have messed up the names. You know, I think they meant Cindy Brickley. That's my mom that you heard about. She was a 3-sport athlete. I only played 2 sports. And she was voted top female athlete in her class. So I'm still convinced they probably had us mixed up, but I didn't really want to say anything till now because I feel like they can't take it away at this point. That would be, so I figured I'll just capitalize on that mistake, and then maybe we can get you in next year, Mom. But first I want to thank all my coaches, my mentors, my teammates. I wouldn't be standing up here without any of you guys. All the way to my professors. My Professor Foster is here, one of my biology professors. And for volleyball, Coach Bowman, all my assistant coaches along the way. Just thank you for everything you've done for me. One story I wanted to share about Bowman and volleyball. And so there's a little background you need for this, but I was pretty superstitious. I liked routine. So every day I ate a cheese sandwich. I just white roll American cheese, that's it. No, not toasted, no condiments, just good old dry cheese sandwich every day. And I used to eat it before games, and I'd take a nap, and then I'd play the game. So we usually got like Subway on our bus rides to the games, and that was always my order. And Bowman, the health guru, always gave me a hard time about it, always tried to persuade me to get something healthier. So, finally, one day, okay, I'll try. I did. I think it was before our game against Hamilton. We were driving up to New York, and I don't even remember what I ordered, but I know it wasn't my cheese sandwich. And then, long story short, I played probably the worst game I ever played in my Trinity career. I literally couldn't hit the ball over the net. So I think we actually may have won, but I played awful. So after the game, Bowman calls me over, and I'm ready to hear about how horrible I played. I'm like, yeah, okay, here we go. She just looks at me and says, "You're eating a cheese sandwich before every game for the rest of the season." And that was really the only thing that could have made me smile in that moment. And she wasn't joking, and that's exactly what I did for the rest of my career, volleyball, basketball. And to this day, I still laugh at that moment, and it brings back such great memories. And Bowman, I just wanted to thank you for everything. You're the reason that I came to Trinity. Okay. This is just the beginning. I still have more. And it was really the best decision I ever made. And thank you for believing me, pushing me, and putting up with me and my family. And I love that we are still able to stay in touch. And you can always get high school volleyball scouting reports from my parents because they're always looking out for Trinity's best interest. And moving on to basketball, Wendy Davis, my head coach, she wasn't able to be here tonight, but I wanted to say a huge thank you for her for also believing in me and giving me the confidence to play basketball. Like I said, I played my junior and senior years after playing volleyball for the first 2 years. With that, I used to work doing stats and announcing for the teams during my freshman and sophomore years for the winter and spring sports. Shout out to Mike Raciti and Dave Kingsley, who we worked with. So I was at most of the basketball games, and I just really missed it as I watched. It was so hard to watch and not play, having played basketball way longer in my life than volleyball. I only started playing volleyball in high school. So eventually I spoke to Wendy, and then she saw my potential, and she really gave me a chance and pushed me to be my best. And I wish she could be here tonight, along with my other coaches, Coach Bob and Coach Mike. Just thank you to all of them. But for basketball, one of my memories, I wish I could say it was, we had one of our first home tournament games in years that we actually won. But probably my number one memory from basketball is a self-proclaimed record that I held. I don't know if you guys can believe it, but I actually airballed. Not one, but 2 free throws my senior year. And it was always the first free throw, too. So then you have to shoot the second one. So I made sure I threw that off the backboard. But yeah, that same year, one of my best friends and my shooting partner, Shay, he also airballed a free throw that season. And ironically, we both were named NESCAC Players of the Year that year. So I say this because, I kind of learned a lesson there that I remember I worked as doing stats as a statistician, and I realized if you have friends high up, maybe these people can help sweep some, stats under the rug when it comes time for those postseason awards. So just want to say thank you to them because I don't know many players of the year that are shooting airball free throws. But I was coming from volleyball, and Bowman didn't let me shoot or do anything for basketball. So, it was hard to go from volleyball to basketball, and I don't really know what your excuse was. But that kind of brings me to my teammates and all my friends that are here. You guys don't know how much it means that you're that you're all here, flying and driving in from all across the country to be here tonight. you guys like are really the ones that made Trinity Athletics everything that it was, like my experience, everything that it was. Just this past year, I was being interviewed by Kevin Callahan, who you guys heard talk earlier about the, giving an oral history of Trinity sports. And he was asking me what games I remembered, what matches, what shots or hits or digs, what were my favorite drills in practice, and on. And we were like on a Zoom, and I was just like, I don't remember any of that. Kind of like Lanier said, I was like, oh, he's like, yeah, you won this big game. And I was like, oh yeah, that game. And he was asking me about practices, and I was like, oh, I do remember this one volleyball practice. We spent the entire practice playing like minute to win it games. And it was like, we had like an Oreo on our forehead. You had to like get it, down into your mouth without using your hands and things like that. And like, I remember all of these things vividly. And I was like, oh, but that's not really what you're asking about. But these are the things I remember. And, van and bus rides to games, being in those little vans, annoying our coaches the whole way as they're driving us. Being on campus during winter break with basketball, where there's no schoolwork, you just get to play basketball. And we got to eat at SIU from their private chef, and actually seeing SIU in the daylight, which was crazy. And I have a lot of memories off the court, as my teammates were my best friends. But I figured I'll keep those to myself, and he probably didn't want to hear all about those, because, I'm talking about like when we would go to the library every Saturday night, study hard, go to bed early so we could wake up early and study some more. And I just felt like those were a little too boring, so I didn't want to let him in on all that, our extracurricular activities. But honestly, I don't know what I would have done without you girls and the rest of my athletic family here, the men's basketball, men's football players. We were all one big family, and I'm forever grateful for you guys. Yes, clap for yourself. Lastly, I wanted to thank my parents and my family. Like I did mention my dad, the avid speech giver. As you've heard a couple people mentioned, he's already in the Hall of Fame, inducted into the first class, big ice hockey stud, holding many records. And I mentioned earlier too, I basically stole my mom's spot. So as Lanier had mentioned, like from this DNA, I didn't really have a choice about being an athlete when I was younger. It was just understood. And my family might be the craziest sports family I know. They can and will talk about sports for hours. And they can usually be found in the corner of a gym 2 hours after a game. The janitors are shutting off the lights, but we're still rehashing the game that I just played. And Bowman knows all about this. And of course, they're all experts, too. They always let me know what I should have done when I made a mistake. Even in volleyball, like I said, I didn't start playing until I was in high school. And my family, no one in my family had ever played volleyball or barely watched, so when I decided to play in high school, don't worry, within a few games, they were all expert volleyball analysts, and they knew all the right plays and everything, so they're quick learners. But honestly, I wouldn't be where I am today without them. Good was not good enough. You had to be great. And I never really thought anything of it. It's just how I was raised. So I'm thankful for that mentality, that they always pushed me to be my best. But really what meant the most to me was seeing them in the crowd. I don't think my parents missed one game. Home or away, we were in Chicago, Florida, wherever they were there. Okay, this part gets me. With my grandmother too, who's Mumu, who's not here anymore, but she was there. Every long car ride back and forth. And my aunts and uncles making the trek every weekend, and not only watching, but setting up tailgates, feeding us, making sure we had everything that we always needed. And I don't know how you guys did it all, but you were there. My parents, with 4 kids, you were there for each and every one of us. I just wanted to say thank you, and I appreciate everything that you've done for me as an athlete and as your daughter. Okay. My family's not really emotional, like hugging, and like we don't like to like admit that we like each other and stuff. So this is really awkward, but I think that's good enough for them. I gave them a good shout out. The last thing I wanted to say, just kind of bringing it all back. My two little nieces are here. They're still awake over there, barely. But the best advice I just wanted to give to them, the next generation, number one, eat your cheese sandwiches. Your coach is not always right. And choose your friends wisely too, because these are the people that you're gonna have all the memories with. Like, these are the things that I remember, not the games, not this. Like, in the moment it felt like it was life or death, these games, but now I barely remember them. And I remember all the times that I had with these crazy people in the back over there. Also, good statisticians are great friends to have when you're an athlete, because you never know when you might need a couple extra rebounds or kills or something, to just like slip you into the Hall of Fame. So make sure you keep those close. So just thank you to everyone. If you're looking for me or the Brickley family later, we'll probably be rehashing this speech over in the corner until we get kicked out tonight. So thank you, and now I'm gonna have my first glass of wine.
Congratulations to all our honorees tonight. It's an amazing celebration of the best of Trinity Athletics and the best of the Bantam spirit. Today in Trinity Athletics, we're fortunate to coach, teach, and mentor over 750 student athletes across 30 teams to be champions in scholarship, sport, and service. And we have an amazing amount of momentum as an athletic program, and that coincides with the momentum at Trinity. So tonight is a wonderful reflection of the impact Trinity can have on people and our community. So grateful to each and every one of you for supporting our programs and continuing to make Trinity a huge part of your lives and ours. Thank you so much.